Ethan's heart froze when his boss, the CEO he'd driven home drunk from the company, party cornered him in the empty break room the next morning. I remember everything you said last night, she whispered, her piercing eyes locked on his, her hand gripping his sleeve with unexpected urgency. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment where in the world you're watching from. Let's go. The fluorescent lights of Meridian Tower hummed above Ethan Parker as he guided his mop across the polished floor of the 32nd floor executive suite. 10 at night, and the offices of Meridian Financial were finally empty except for one. Through the frosted glass wall of the corner office, he could see the silhouette of Victoria Hayes, the newly appointed CEO, still hunched over her desk, surrounded by stacks of reports and illuminated by the blue glow of her laptop screen. 4 months since she'd taken over, and Ethan had never seen her leave before him. Not once. Tonight was different, though. Tonight was the annual company Galatha, one night when even Victoria Hayes would have to step away from her spreadsheets and budgets to perform her due face of the company. Ethan dipped his mop into the bucket, wrung it out, and continued his methodical sweep across the floor. He had exactly 2 hours to finish his shift before Mars. Henderson from next door would need to leave. 2 hours to clean 3 more floors before he could go home to relieve his elderly neighbor of babysitties. 2 hours before Maya would sleepily ask if he'd be there in the morning to make her special Sunday pancakes, the ones with the blueberry smile. Yes, I understand that, Richard. Victoria's voice carried through the glass, sharp and clear. The Henderson acquisition is crucial, but I can't exactly skip the gala to finish the proposal. Yes, the board will all be there. That's precisely why I need to make an appearance. Ethan kept his head down, invisible as always. The cleaning staff existed in a parallel universe to the executive, present but unseen, essential but overlooked. That suited him just fine. After Diane's death 3 years ago, invisibility had become a comfort, a shield against the world's prying eyes and pitying glances. Here, in the quiet of the night shift, he could simply exist, do his job, and earn the paycheck that kept a roof over Maya's head. Victoria's voice rose suddenly. I don't care what Jenkins thinks. The numbers don't support his strategy, and I won't present it to the board just because he's been here longer than me. Ethan glanced up involuntarily. Through the glass, he could see her pacing now, one hand gripping her phone, the other raking through her perfectly styled chestnut hair. Even in obvious frustration, there was something commanding about her presence, something that demanded attention. Ethan had observed enough to know that Victoria Hayes hadn't reached the top by accident. Every meeting, every decision, every late night was calculated, deliberate. Fine, I'll see you there at 8. She ended the call abruptly and tossed her phone onto the desk with a clatter that Ethan could hear through the glass. He quickly averted his eyes and resumed mopping. Not his business, not his world. He had 18 minutes to finish this floor. The door to the office swung open and Victoria Hayes stepped out, a vision in a midnight blue dress that made Ethan freeze mid-mop. The CEO was always impeccably dressed in tailored suits and crisp blouses, but this was different. This was Victoria Hayes, transformed, elegant, striking, and somehow even more intimidating. Oh, she startled slightly, noticing him for perhaps the first time in 4 months. I didn't realize anyone was still here. Dots, single quotes. Ethan straightened, feeling suddenly self-conscious in his worn blue uniform. Just finishing up, ma'am. Don't mind me. Victoria glanced at her watch. A sleek, undoubtedly expensive timepiece that gleamed under the fluorescent lights. It's quite late. Night shift, Ethan explained simply, then immediately wondered why he'd felt the need to state the obvious. She nodded, distracted, then moved to walk past him toward the elevator. 3 steps in, she wobbled slightly, her hand shooting out to steady herself against the wall. Are you all right, ma'am? The question escaped before Ethan could stop himself. Victoria straightened, composing herself with practiced ease. Fine. Just these ridiculous shoes. She glanced down at her stiletto heels with a flash of annoyance. And perhaps that glass of liquid courage I had in my office. Ethan noticed then the slight flush to her cheeks, the barely perceptible softening of her typically razor-sharp gaze. Not drunk, but definitely not entirely sober either. Long night ahead? He asked, then immediately regretted the familiarity. To his surprise, Victoria didn't bristle at the question. Instead, she let out a small, humorless laugh, the longest. 3 hours of making small talk with board members who are waiting for me to fail, clients who are nervous about a woman taking the reins, and Richard Jenkins undermining me at every turn. She stopped abruptly, as if suddenly remembering who she was talking to. Sorry, you don't need to hear about my problems. No apology needed, Ethan said, resuming his mopping. We all have our battles. Victoria studied him for a moment, her head tilted slightly. You're Parker, right? Ethan Parker? You've been here for 5 years now? The fact that she knew his name caught him completely off guard. Yes, ma'am. Almost 6, actually. She nodded, seemingly pleased with herself for the near-correct recollection. I make it a point to know everyone who works here, Mr. Parker, even if I don't always have the opportunity to interact with them. Her phone buzzed from somewhere within her small clutch purse. She retrieved it, glanced at the screen and sighed. My car's here. Time to go put on a show. Ethan watched as she made her way to the elevator, noticing the slight unsteadiness in her typically confident stride. That liquid courage might have been more substantial than she'd let on. He hesitated, then called after her. Ms. Hayes? She turned, one eyebrow raised in question. "Be careful tonight," he said, the words feeling both too familiar and too inadequate. Victoria's expression softened for just a moment, a glimpse of something genuine beneath the polished exterior. "Always, Mr. Parker." The elevator doors opened and she stepped inside, disappearing from view. Ethan shook his head and returned to his mop. Not his business, not his world. 3 hours later, Ethan was in the parking garage, his shift complete, keys in hand. The night air was crisp with early autumn, and he was already calculating how many hours of sleep he could get before Maya would bounce into his room, eager for those promised pancakes. He rounded the corner toward his aging Toyota when a figure caught his eye, someone leaning against one of the concrete pillars near the executive parking spaces. Victoria Hayes, still in her gala dress, now paired incongruously with flat shoes that she must have had in her car, her heels dangling from one hand. Even from a distance, Ethan could tell something was wrong. Her typically perfect posture was gone, replaced by a slight slouch as she stared at her phone. Against his better judgment, Ethan approached. "Ms. Hayes, is everything all right?" She looked up, surprise registering on her face before recognition set in. "Mr. Parker, twice in one night. Must be my lucky day." Her words carried the slight slur of someone who'd had significantly more to drink since he'd last seen her. "Are you waiting for your car service?" he asked, glancing around the nearly empty garage. Victoria let out a short, bitter laugh. "Apparently not. My regular driver's unavailable, and the service just texted to say they're backed up by at least an hour." She waved her phone for emphasis. "Something about a concert letting out downtown. Can't you call someone else? A friend, or—" Ethan trailed off as Victoria's expression hardened. "I'm perfectly capable of handling this myself. Thank you," she said, the CEO persona slipping back into place despite her obvious intoxication. She pushed herself away from the pillar and swayed dangerously. Ethan instinctively stepped forward, catching her elbow to steady her. "With all due respect, ma'am, you're in no condition to handle anything right now, especially not driving." Victoria stared at his hand on her arm, then up at his face. For a moment, Ethan thought she might fire him on the spot for his presumption. Instead, she sighed, the fight seemingly draining out of her. "You're right," she admitted quietly. "I may have overestimated my tolerance and underestimated the potency of Richard's special martinis." Ethan released her arm, relieved she wasn't arguing. "I can wait with you until your car arrives." Victoria checked her phone again and groaned. "An hour and 20 minutes now? Fantastic." She looked up at him, vulnerability briefly replacing her usual confidence. "I just want to go home, Mr. Parker." The words hung in the air between them, simple and honest in a way that made Ethan see past the title and the corner office to the exhausted woman beneath. Before he could second-guess himself, he heard his own voice saying, "I can drive you." "You don't have to do that," Victoria said, though the relief in her voice betrayed her true feelings. Ethan shrugged. "It's no trouble. My car's not fancy, but it'll get you home safely." The walk to his Toyota was awkward. Victoria struggling to maintain her dignity, despite her unsteady gait. Ethan stayed close without hovering, ready to offer support but careful not to overstep. When they reached his car, he quickly cleared Maya's booster seat and a scatter of children's books from the back seat, tossing them into the trunk. "I'm sorry about the mess," he said, opening the passenger door for her. "I wasn't expecting company." Victoria slid into the seat with as much grace as she could muster. "No apologies necessary. This is very kind of you." Ethan got behind the wheel, suddenly aware of every scratch on the dashboard, every worn spot on the upholstery. This 10-year-old Toyota was a world away from the luxury cars Victoria was accustomed to. "Where to?" he asked, starting the engine. "Westbrook Heights. The Archer Building. Of course, the most exclusive address in the city. A sleek glass tower with penthouses that cost more than Ethan would earn in 20 years. They drove in silence for several minutes, the late-night streets nearly empty. Victoria leaned her head against the window, eyes half closed. Ethan wondered if she was going to fall asleep. "Did you always want to be a janitor, Mr. Parker?" The question came suddenly, startling him. "Ethan," he corrected automatically. "And no, not exactly a childhood dream job." "What was the dream then?" She turned to look at him, genuinely curious. He hesitated. No one had asked him that in years. "Architecture, actually. I was in my second year at State when my wife got pregnant with Maya. Had to drop out and find work." "You never went back?" "Life happened," Ethan said simply. "Diane, my wife, she died when Maya was 4. Cancer. After that, being a good dad became my only priority." Victoria was quiet for a moment. "I'm sorry," she finally said, the words carrying the weight of genuine empathy rather than obligatory politeness. "It's been 3 years," Ethan said. "Maya and I, we found our rhythm." "How old is she now?" 7, going on 17. Ethan smiled despite himself. "Smart as a whip. Teacher says she's reading at a 5th grade level. You must be proud. Every day." The conversation lapsed into silence again, but it was more comfortable now. At a red light, Ethan glanced over to find Victoria studying him with an unreadable expression. "What about you?" he asked, surprising himself with his boldness. "Did you always want to run a financial empire?" Victoria laughed, a genuine sound free from the practiced restraint he'd observed in her professional interactions. "God, I wanted to be a marine biologist. Spent every summer at my grandparents' place on the coast. Obsessed with tide pools and dolphins. What changed? Reality. Practicality. My father's expectations. She ticked them off on her fingers. Take your pick. Finance made more sense than chasing fish around the ocean. Do you regret it? The light turned green and Ethan returned his attention to the road, wondering if he'd crossed a line with the personal question. Sometimes, Victoria admitted after a long pause. On days like today, when I've spent 12 hours fighting to prove I deserve a position that no one questioned, when Harold Bennett held it for 20 years, when I have to smile through thinly veiled sexist comments from board members who still call me young lady despite my MBA and decade of experience, she sighed. But then there are the good days, when I close a deal that saves jobs or secure funding for a promising startup. Those days I don't regret it at all. They were entering the upscale district now. Streets lined with boutiques and high-end restaurants, all closed for the night but still glowing with subtle lighting that highlighted their expensive facades. Turn left at the next light, Victoria instructed, sitting up straighter. The Archer is at the end of the block. Ethan followed her directions, pulling up to the imposing glass tower with its uniformed doorman and marble entryway. He put the car in park but kept the engine running. Thank you, Ethan, Victoria said, making no immediate move to exit. This was ... unexpectedly nice. Just doing the right thing, he replied with a small smile. The right thing would have been calling a car service and waiting, she pointed out. You went above and beyond. I won't forget it. She reached for the door handle, then paused. Would you like to come up for coffee? You must be exhausted after your shift, and I make an excellent espresso. The offer was casual, but there was something vulnerable in her expression, as if she wasn't quite ready to be alone. Warning bells sounded in Ethan's mind. This was his boss, his very intoxicated boss, inviting him to her penthouse at nearly 2 in the morning. No matter how innocent the intention, it was a complication he couldn't afford. I appreciate the offer, but I should get home to Maya. Mrs. Henderson is probably ready to head home herself. Victoria nodded, accepting the refusal without offense. Of course, your daughter comes first. That's as it should be. She opened the door and stepped out with surprising steadiness. Before closing it, she leaned down to meet his eye. Good night, Ethan Parker, and thank you again. He watched as she walked confidently toward the entrance, the doorman straightening to attention as she approached. Only when she had disappeared inside did Ethan release the breath he hadn't realized he was holding. The drive home was quiet, his mind replaying the unexpected encounter. In 6 years of working at Meridian, he'd never had a conversation like that with anyone in management, let alone the CEO. Tomorrow, Victoria Hayes would be back in her corner office, and he would be invisible again, mop in hand. That was the natural order of things. Mrs. Henderson was dozing on his couch when he let himself into the small apartment. She startled awake at the sound of the door, blinking owlishly behind her thick glasses. Everything okay, Ethan? You're later than usual. Fine, Mrs. Ski. Just got held up at work. How was Maya? An angel, as always. She fell asleep halfway through Charlotte's Web. We'll have to finish it tomorrow. The elderly woman gathered her knitting in her purse. You look tired, dear. More than usual. Long night, Ethan said, walking her to the door. Thank you again for staying. After Mrs. Henderson left, Ethan checked on Maya, finding her fast asleep in her small bed surrounded by stuffed animals. Her dark curls, so like her mother's, spilled across the pillow, her face peaceful in sleep. He gently tucked the blanket more securely around her shoulders and placed a soft kiss on her forehead. Love you, pumpkin, he whispered. In his own room, Ethan stripped off his uniform and stepped into the shower, letting the hot water wash away the physical evidence of his workday. But nothing could rinse away the lingering impression of Victoria Hayes, her unexpected vulnerability, her genuine interest in his life, the way her practiced corporate mask had slipped to reveal the woman beneath. As he climbed into bed, exhaustion finally claiming him, Ethan reminded himself not to read too much into the evening's events. Victoria had been drunk, lonely perhaps, and he had been convenient. By Monday morning, she would likely barely remember their interaction, let alone the details he had shared about his life. Ethan drifted off to sleep with that comforting thought, unprepared for how completely wrong he would turn out to be. Sunday passed in a blur of pancakes, playground visits, and the comforting routine of life with Maya. By the time Ethan pulled into Meridian Tower's employee parking section on Monday evening, the surreal interaction with Victoria Hayes felt like a dream, vivid but disconnected from his real life. Daddy, can I have my drawing back? Maya asked from the back seat, already unbuckling her booster. I want to show Miss Abby it after school tomorrow. It's in your purple folder, pumpkin. Ethan helped her out of the car, double-checking that she had her backpack with homework finished and her overnight bag packed. Mondays were always a juggling act. Maya would spend the night at his sister Kate's apartment while he worked his shift. Kate was waiting in the lobby, seated in one of the sleek modern chairs that were more stylish than comfortable. She stood when she spotted them, arms open for Maya's running hug. It's my favorite niece. Kate scooped Maya up, planting a kiss on her forehead. I'm your only niece, Maya giggled, the familiar exchange a ritual between them, which makes you my favorite by default. Kate set Maya down and turned to Ethan. You look tired, bro. Everything okay? Just the usual Monday feeling? Ethan deflected. He wasn't ready to share the strange encounter with Victoria. Knowing Kate, she'd read too much and turned it into something it wasn't. Thanks again for taking her, please. It's the highlight of my week. We're making homemade pizza and watching Encanto for the 100th time. The songs never get old, Maya declared solemnly. Ethan crouched down to Maya's level. Be good for Aunt Kate, okay? I'll pick you up from school tomorrow. Promise you'll be awake to have breakfast with me. Maya's small hand rested on his cheek, her eyes serious. Promise. Kissed her forehead. I love you bigger than the sky, I love you bigger than the universe, she responded. Their nightly ritual transferred to this temporary goodbye. After they left, Ethan headed to the maintenance office to clock in. The familiar routine of changing into his uniform and gathering his cleaning cart settled his nerves. Just another Monday night, he told himself. Just another shift. He was halfway through his first floor when his supervisor, Ray, found him. Parker! The older man's voice echoed in the empty hallway. You're wanted upstairs. Ethan frowned. What for? Hell if I know. Call came down from the executive floor. Ray looked both suspicious and impressed. What'd you do, Parker? Nobody from our department gets called up there unless something's wrong. I have no idea. Ethan lied, his stomach tightening with apprehension. The elevator ride to the 32nd floor felt interminable. Had he crossed a line by driving Victoria home? Was she embarrassed that he'd seen her vulnerable? Or worse, had she somehow taken offense, interpreted his refusal of her coffee invitation as an insult? The elevator doors opened to reveal the now familiar executive suite, quiet and dimly lit after hours. Only Victoria's office blazed with light, a beacon at the end of the hallway. Ethan hesitated, then knocked on the glass door. Come in. Her voice was crisp, professional, nothing like the softer tones from Saturday night. Victoria sat behind her desk, impeccable in a charcoal suit, her hair pulled back in a sleek bun. No trace remained of the slightly disheveled woman he'd driven home. This was the CEO in her element, radiating authority and control. You wanted to see me, Ms. Hayes? Mr. Parker. Thank you for coming up. She gestured to the chair opposite her desk. Please sit. Ethan perched awkwardly on the edge of the plush leather chair, feeling distinctly out of place in his janitor's uniform. I wanted to thank you properly for Saturday night, Victoria began, her tone businesslike. Your assistance was greatly appreciated. It was no problem, Ethan said, relief washing over him. Not in trouble then. Nevertheless, it was above and beyond what could be expected. Victoria opened a drawer and withdrew an envelope, sliding it across the desk toward him. I'd like to offer you this as a token of my appreciation. Ethan made no move to take it. That's not necessary, Miss Hayes. I insist, with all due respect. I don't want your money. The words came out more forcefully than he'd intended. I did what anyone would do. Victoria looked genuinely surprised, as if the possibility of him refusing hadn't occurred to her. I'm not trying to offend you, Mr. Parker. I simply want to acknowledge your kindness in a tangible way. Then say thank you, Ethan said simply. That's all I need. For a moment, Victoria seemed at a loss for words, likely a rare occurrence for her. She slowly withdrew the envelope. Very well, Mr. Parker. Sincerely, you're welcome, Miss Hayes. An awkward silence fell between them. Ethan stood, assuming the conversation was over. Actually, there was one other matter, Victoria said, stopping him. She hesitated, seeming uncharacteristically uncertain. I hope I didn't say anything inappropriate during our drive. My recollection of the evening is somewhat hazy after the third martini. Ethan shook his head. Nothing inappropriate. We just talked about what exactly? There was genuine concern in her eyes. You mentioned wanting to be a marine biologist once. I mentioned having studied architecture before dropping out. Normal conversation. Relief visibly washed over her. Good. That's good. She straightened some papers on her desk, a gesture that seemed more about regaining composure than actual organization. I try to maintain a certain professional distance as CEO. It can be complicated otherwise. I understand, Ethan said, though part of him couldn't help but feel a twinge of disappointment. The woman who had shared her frustrations and dreams in his car had been real and relatable. This polished corporate figure felt like a carefully constructed facade by comparison. Victoria nodded, clearly ready to close the subject. Thank you again for your discretion, Mr. Parker. I won't keep you from your duties any longer. Ethan turned to leave, then paused at the door. For what it's worth, Ms. Hayes, I think the Tide Pool's loss was the financial world's gain. A flicker of surprise crossed her face, followed by the ghost of a genuine smile. Good night, Mr. Parker. Good night, Ms. Hayes. Back in the hallway, Ethan exhaled slowly. That was that acknowledgement given. Boundaries re-established. They would return to their separate orbits, the brief intersection of their worlds nothing more than an anomaly. 2 weeks passed, and Ethan saw Victoria only in passing, a glimpse as she strode purposefully through the lobby, a distant figure in meetings visible through glass walls. Their brief, unusual connection seemed firmly in the past, exactly as he had expected. Then came the night of the broken pipe. Ethan was on the 30th floor when the alert came through on his work radio. A water pipe had burst in the executive bathroom, flooding part of the suite. Ray's voice crackled with urgency. Parker, you're closest. Get up there with the wet vac and extraction equipment. Maintenance is shutting off the water main now. When Ethan arrived at the 32nd floor, he found chaos. Water pooled across the marble floor of the executive washroom, seeping under the door and spreading into the hallway. And standing in the middle of it all, her designer heels in one hand and her suit skirt hitched up above her ankles, was Victoria Hayes, attempting to dam the flow with a makeshift barrier of paper towels. Ms. Hayes? She looked up, her expression cycling rapidly from frustration to recognition to something that might have been relief. Merc Parker. Thank goodness. This is a disaster. The water main should be off any minute, he said, already unraveling the heavy-duty hose from the wet vacuum. What happened? I have no idea. Working late, heard a loud bang from in here. and found Old Faithful erupting from under the sink. She gestured to the broken pipe, still dripping despite the reduced pressure. I tried to call maintenance, but no one answered, so I thought I'd try to contain it myself. Could have just evacuated and left it for us to handle. Ethan pointed out, wading into the flooded bathroom to position the wet vac. And leave my office and all its contents to the mercy of a flood? I think not. Victoria stepped back as Ethan began extracting the water, the machine's powerful suction instantly making a difference. Besides, crisis management is part of my job description, though I admit plumbing emergencies weren't specifically listed. Despite the situation, Ethan found himself smiling at her dry humor. I think you're above the pay grade for flood control, Ms. Hayes. Evidently not, she replied, gesturing to her soaked pantyhose and waterlogged paper towel barrier. For the next 20 minutes they worked side by side, Ethan operating the industrial water extractor while Victoria, having abandoned all pretense of CEO dignity, helped move furniture and belongings away from the spreading water. When maintenance finally arrived with more equipment, the worst of the flooding had already been contained. "We'll take it from here, Parker," the head of maintenance said, surveying the scene. "Good work getting it under control, Victoria." Now standing barefoot in the hallway, her suit rumpled and her perfect bun coming undone, looked more like a survivor of a natural disaster than the polished executive Ethan was accustomed to seeing. "Thank you for your quick response," she said to Ethan as the maintenance team took over. "You saved my office from significant damage." "Just doing my job," he replied with a small smile. "Though I don't think water rescue was in your job description," Victoria laughed, a genuine, unguarded sound that transformed her face. "Definitely not. I think my Louboutins are beyond salvation." She held up the waterlogged heels with a rueful expression. "Casualties of war," Ethan said solemnly, earning another laugh. Victoria glanced at her watch and sighed. "It's nearly midnight. I should head home and change into something that doesn't smell like pipe water." "Do you have a way to get home?" Ethan asked. "I'm assuming your regular driver has left for the night. I'll call a car service," she said, then hesitated. Unless ... single quotes, the unspoken question hung between them, a callback to their previous encounter. This time, however, there was no alcohol involved, just two people who had waded through a minor disaster together, breaking down the rigid barriers of hierarchy in the process. "I could give you a ride," Ethan offered, surprising himself. "If you don't mind waiting until I finish securing this area." Victoria tucked a stray strand of hair behind her ear, an unexpectedly vulnerable gesture from someone usually so composed. "I wouldn't want to impose a second time." "It's not an imposition," Ethan assured her. "Give me 15 minutes to help get this under control and I'll meet you in the lobby." Victoria hesitated, then nodded. "Thank you. I'll go salvage what I can from my office while you finish up." 20 minutes later, Ethan pulled up to the front entrance in his Toyota. Victoria stood waiting, having exchanged her soaked pumps for a pair of ballet flats she apparently kept in her desk drawer. She'd attempted to restore order to her appearance, but there was still something endearingly disheveled about her, a stark contrast to her usual immaculate presentation. "Your chariot awaits," Ethan said with a small smile as she slid into the passenger seat. "Twice in 1 month," Victoria remarked, fastening her seatbelt. "This is becoming a habit, Mr. Parker." "Ethan," he reminded her. "And technically, this time you're sober." She laughed, the sound warm and genuine in the quiet car. "Fair point, though I'm not sure which is worse for my dignity, being driven home drunk from a gala or soaking wet from a plumbing disaster." "The wet look is very avant-garde," Ethan assured her with mock seriousness as he pulled away from the curb. "Yes, summer that would be all the rage in next month's fashion mag." Victoria ran a hand through her damp hair, grimacing. "I'm afraid your car seats might suffer some water damage. They've survived worse. Maya spilled an entire milkshake back there last summer. The smell lingered for weeks." "How is Maya?" Victoria asked, the question surprisingly genuine. "Still reading above her grade level?" The fact that she remembered that detail from their previous conversation caught Ethan off guard. "She is currently working her way through the Harry Potter series. I'm reading them aloud to her at bedtime, but she started sneaking ahead on her own when I'm at work. Smart girl. I did the same thing with Nancy Drew books when I was about her age. My mother would find me reading under the covers with a flashlight." The image of a young Victoria rebelliously reading past bedtime made Ethan smile. "I can picture that. Were you always so ... determined?" "According to my parents, I came out of the womb with a 5-year plan," Victoria said wryly. "My father was a corporate attorney. Excellence wasn't praised in our house, it was expected." "That sounds like a lot of pressure for a kid," Victoria shrugged. "It prepared me for the real world, though sometimes I wonder ... single quotes." She trailed off, staring out the window at the city lights. "Wonder what?" Ethan prompted gently. "If I ever had a chance to figure out who I was apart from those expectations." She shook her head slightly. "Sorry, that got unexpectedly deep for a car ride." "I don't mind," Ethan said honestly. "Sometimes it's easier to talk about the real stuff with someone who isn't part of your everyday circle." Victoria turned to look at him, her expression thoughtful. "Is that what we're doing? Talking about the real stuff?" "I think so," Ethan replied, glancing briefly from the road to meet her eyes. "Unless you'd prefer to discuss quarterly earnings or proper floor waxing techniques." That earned him another genuine laugh. God, no. I've had enough shop talk to last a lifetime. She sighed, leaning back against the headrest. It's refreshing, to have a conversation that isn't about proving myself or defending a decision or navigating office politics. I imagine it gets exhausting. You have no idea. Everyone wants something from the CEO. Attention, approval, advancement. It's rare to have a conversation where I'm just ... person. For what it's worth, Ethan said, you make a pretty good person, even when you're soaking wet and slightly frazzled. Victoria's smile softened. Thank you. That might be the nicest thing anyone's said to me in months. They drove in comfortable silence for a while, the late-night streets nearly empty. When they reached her building, Ethan pulled up to the entrance just as he had 2 weeks earlier. Well, here we are again, Victoria said, making no immediate move to leave. Thank you for the ride, Ethan. Again. Anytime, he replied, the word feeling more genuine than he'd intended, though maybe next time could involve fewer workplace disasters. One can hope. She reached for the door handle, then paused. Would you like to come up for coffee? And before you declined, she held up a hand to forestall his objection. I know you need to get back to work. I meant another time. Maybe when you're not on the clock and I'm not dripping on your upholstery. The invitation caught Ethan completely off guard. That would be ... single quotes inappropriate. Victoria supplied with a hint of challenge in her tone. Crossing professional boundaries? A terrible idea given our respective positions at Meridian. I was going to say nice. Ethan finished quietly. Victoria's expression softened. Oh, but yes. Also potentially complicated, he acknowledged. Life is complicated, Ethan. She met his gaze directly, but sometimes I think we hide behind complications because we're afraid of what might happen if we simply allowed ourselves to connect with another human being. The words hung between them, honest and disarming. For a moment, Ethan could see past the title and the authority to the woman beneath intelligent. Yes, and driven, but also lonely in a way he recognized all too well. Saturday, he said finally. I don't work weekends. Maya has a sleepover at a friend's house. Meet you somewhere, if you wanted. Victoria's smile bloomed slowly, transforming her face. I'd like that. She pulled out her phone. Here, put in your number. I'll text you, and we can figure out details. Ethan hesitated only briefly before taking the phone and entering his contact information. This was uncharted territory, fraught with potential complications, but something about Victoria Hayes made him willing to navigate those complications. Good night, Ethan, she said as she returned his phone, her fingers brushing his momentarily. I'll see you Saturday. Good night, Victoria, he replied, using her first name for the first time. She smiled at that, a smile that stayed with him long after she'd disappeared into her building, and he'd returned to Meridian Tower to finish his shift. The rest of the week passed in a strange haze of anticipation and doubt. What exactly had he agreed to? Not a date, surely. A coffee between ... What? Friends? Colleagues? Neither term seemed adequate to describe whatever was developing between him and Victoria Hayes. By Saturday afternoon, Ethan had changed his shirt 3 times before settling on a simple blue button-down that Kate had given him for his birthday. He dropped Maya off at her friend Zoe's house for her sleepover, gave the requisite parental warnings about behavior and politeness, and then found himself driving toward the small cafe Victoria had suggested in her text. It was an unassuming place in a quiet neighborhood far from both Meridian Tower and Victoria's luxury apartment. Building neutral territory, Ethan realized. The kind of place where neither of them would likely run into anyone they knew. Victoria was already there when he arrived, seated at a corner table with 2 coffee cups. She wore jeans and a simple cream sweater, her hair loose around her shoulders. Without her power suits and commanding heels, she looked younger, more approachable but no less striking. She spotted him and waved, a gesture so casual and genuine that it instantly eased some of Ethan's nervousness. I hope you don't mind that I ordered for us, she said as he sat across from her. The barista recommended their signature caramel latte. Apparently it's life-changing. Bold claim for coffee, Ethan replied, grateful for the easy opening. I thought so too, but I'm willing to have my life changed if the flavor profile is impressive enough. She pushed one of the mugs toward him. Cheers to neutral territory in civilian clothes. Ethan smiled, raising his mug to clink against hers. To a day off from being CEO and janitor. I'll drink to that. Victoria took a sip, closing her eyes momentarily. Okay, maybe not life-changing, but definitely deserving of its reputation for the first few minutes. They engaged in the kind of careful small talk that strangers might exchange, the unseasonably warm weather, the charm of the neighborhood, the quality of the coffee. But gradually, as the initial awkwardness faded, their conversation deepened. So why architecture? Victoria asked, leaning forward slightly. What drew you to it? Ethan considered the question, surprised by how long it had been since anyone had asked about his former passion. I've always been fascinated by the way spaces affect people, how the right design can change how we feel, how we interact, how we live. There's something powerful about creating something that combines art and function, that shapes human experience while also solving practical problems. Victoria nodded, her expression thoughtful. I can see why that would appeal to you. You strike me as someone who pays attention to the details that others miss. Occupational hazard of being a janitor, Ethan said with a self-deprecating smile. You notice a lot when people don't notice you. Is that how you feel at Meridian? Invisible? The directness of the question caught him off guard. Most of the time, yes. It's not necessarily a bad thing. There's a certain freedom in invisibility, and a certain loneliness, Victoria observed quietly. Their eyes met across the table, a moment of unexpected understanding passing between them. This woman who commanded boardrooms and made million-dollar decisions somehow saw him, Really saw him. In a way few people had since Diane died. What about you? Ethan asked, partly to deflect from the sudden intensity of the moment. Do you ever feel invisible? Even at the top? Victoria's smile turned wistful. The irony of leadership is that everyone sees the position, but few see the person. In some ways, being CEO is its own kind of invisibility. Their conversation flowed easily after that, moving from professional isolation to their individual journeys. Victoria spoke of her rise through Meridian's ranks, the challenges she'd faced as a woman in finance, the sacrifices she'd made, the subtle and not-so-subtle sexism she'd battled. Ethan shared more about his abbreviated college career, his early marriage to Diane, and their dreams before life intervened. We had it all planned out, Ethan said, absently turning his empty coffee mug between his hands. I'd finish my degree, work for an established firm for 5 years while building contacts, then start my own practice. Diane was going to teach elementary school. We'd buy a little craftsman bungalow and fix it up together. What happened? Victoria asked gently. Reality, Ethan echoed her earlier answer. Maya came along earlier than we'd planned. We were happy, just ... adjusting our timeline. Then Diane got sick when Maya was 3. He swallowed hard. By the time they diagnosed the cancer properly, it was already stage 4. She was gone 8 months later. Victoria reached across the table, briefly touching his hand. I'm so sorry. He nodded, acknowledging her sympathy without dwelling on it. Maya was just 4. She barely remembers her mom now, which breaks my heart sometimes. I keep photos everywhere, tell her stories, but ... single quotes, but memories fade. Victoria finished for him. My mother died when I was 12. I understand. I didn't know that, and said softly. Heart attack. Completely unexpected. Victoria's gaze turned inward, remembering. My father doubled down on his expectations after that, as if success could somehow fill the void she left behind. Did it? Not even close. Victoria smiled sadly, but I became very good at pretending it did. Their eyes met across the table, a moment of perfect understanding passing between them. For all their differences in circumstance and status, they recognized in each other the familiar shape of loss and the solitary burden of carrying on. The barista approached their table. We're closing in about 15 minutes, just so you know. Both startled, surprised to discover they'd been talking for nearly 2 hours. I can't believe how late it's gotten, Victoria said, checking her watch. This was ... single quotes, Ethan supplied with a small smile. Despite our misgivings about complications. Very nice, she agreed, her expression warm. I haven't talked like this with anyone in, I can't even remember how long. They stepped outside into the gentle evening air. The sun was setting, painting the sky in watercolor hues of pink and gold. Would you like to take a walk? Victoria suggested, nodding toward a nearby park. Unless you need to get back from Maya. She's at a sleepover until tomorrow afternoon, Ethan replied. A walk sounds perfect. The park was quiet, populated mainly by joggers and dog walk. Victoria and Ethan strolled along the winding path, their conversation continuing to flow naturally between serious topics and lighter moments. She told him about her brief, disastrous marriage to her business school sweetheart. We were better as competitors than partners, and he shared stories of Maya's early years, including his terrified first attempts at doing her hair. I watched so many YouTube tutorials about braiding, he admitted. I still can't do a proper French braid, but my ponytails have gotten respectable reviews from the second-grade fashion critics. I'm impressed. Victoria laughed. My father hired a nanny after my mother died. He had no idea what to do with a preteen daughter. I don't think he ever learned to see me as a person rather than a project. That sounds lonely, Ethan observed. It was. Victoria's voice softened. Is it strange that I sometimes envy Maya? Not for losing her mother, of course, but for having a father who sees her. I think we all envy what we didn't have growing up, Ethan replied. I envy kids who had financial security, who never had to worry about whether their parents could afford new shoes or school trips. They reached a small pond where ducks floated serenely on the darkening water. Victoria paused, leaning against the wooden railing. Can I ask you something, Ethan? Her voice had taken on a more serious tone. Of course. Are you happy with your life as it is now? The question caught him off guard. He considered it carefully before answering. Parts of it, absolutely. Maya brings me more joy than I ever thought possible. But other parts ... off searching for the right words. I've made peace with the circumstances that led me here. But that doesn't mean I don't sometimes wonder about the road not taken. Victoria nodded, her gaze on the water. I think about tide pools sometimes, she admitted. About who I might have been if I'd followed that early passion instead of my father's expectation. It's never too late to buy a snorkel, Ethan said, half joking. Says the janitor with an architect's eye. She returned, her smile gentle rather than mocking. The unspoken question hovered between them. What keeps us from changing course? Fear? Responsibility? Inertia? The truth is, Ethan said slowly, I could probably go back to school now. Maya's older, more independent. I've saved a little, but there's security in knowing exactly what tomorrow will bring, even if it's not exactly what you want. The devil you know, Victoria. Exactly. And Maya's stability matters more than my unfulfilled ambitions. Victoria turned to face him fully, her expression earnest. What if you could have both? Security for Maya and a chance to pursue architecture again? Ethan laughed softly. That would require a fairy godmother with a very impressive wand. Or a CEO with a company scholarship program and flexible work arrangements, Victoria countered, her tone casual but her eyes intense. Ethan stared at her, momentarily speechless. Victoria, you can't. I absolutely can, she interrupted. Meridian has an employee education program that's criminally underutilized. Night classes, online options, tuition reimbursement. It's still work different hours. different position if you wanted, but you could finish your degree. That sounds suspiciously like special treatment, Ethan said carefully. It's not special treatment to recognize talent and potential, Victoria replied. It's good business. Besides, the program exists for exactly this purpose, to help employees advance their education and careers. People would talk, Ethan pointed out. The janitor suddenly getting fast-tracked, ... Let them talk. Victoria's dismissal was pure. CEO confident and uncompromising. I didn't get where I am by worrying about office gossip. Ethan shook his head, overwhelmed by the offer and its implications. This is ... a lot to process, and it would complicate things between us, whatever this is. Victoria's expression soft. I know, and I'm not trying to pressure you or blur lines. The offer stands regardless of anything else. She hesitated, then added more quietly, I believe in second chances. Ethan, for everyone. The sincerity in her voice touched something deep in him. Before he could respond, her phone chimed with an incoming message. Victoria glanced at it and sighed. Work? Ethan asked. She nodded. The Singapore office. I have a call with them in 30 minutes. She looked genuinely regretful. I should get back, of course. Ethan tried to hide his disappointment. I can walk you to your car. As they made their way back through the park, Victoria's professional persona began to reassert itself, subtle changes in her posture and expression that Ethan recognized from observing her at Meridian. By the time they reached her sleek black BMW, she was already mentally shifting gears, preparing for her call. Thank you for today, she said, turning to him at her car. It was ... refreshing. It was... Ethan agreed. Thank you for suggesting it. An awkward moment passed between them. The natural end of a date would typically involve some gesture of affection or promise of another meeting, but their situation defied such simple protocol. Think about the education program, Victoria said finally. No pressure, no strings attached, just ... Think about it. I will, Ethan promised. She smiled, a genuine expression that momentarily broke through her returning CEO mask. Goodbye, Ethan. Goodbye, Victoria. He watched her drive away, his mind whirling with possibilities he hadn't allowed himself to consider in years. The practical part of him warned against hop, against believing that a chance encounter with the CEO could somehow rewrite his story. Yet he couldn't deny the seed of possibilities she had planted, or the connection that had formed between them against all odds. Ethan walked to his own car in the fading light, feeling as though he stood at a crossroads. One path leading back to the comfortable predictability of his current life, the other toward an uncertain future filled with both promise and complication. And at the center of that complication stood Victoria Hayes, a woman who had somehow seen the architect beneath the janitor's uniform. Monday night found Ethan back at Meridian Tower, pushing his cleaning cart with mechanical efficiency while his mind remained stubbornly fixed on Victoria's offer. The employee education program, his chance to finish what he'd started nearly 8 years ago, a bridge back to the life he'd once imagined for himself. He'd spent Sunday researching the program online. Meridian's corporate website detailed the initiative as part of their employee development benefits. It wasn't something Victoria had invented on the spot. It genuinely existed. Yet Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that pursuing it would entangle him and Victoria in a way that blurred professional and personal boundaries. You're quiet tonight, Ray commented as they crossed paths in the break room. Everything okay with Maya? She's fine, Ethan assured him. Just thinking about something. Ray nodded, not pressing further. That was one of the things Ethan appreciated about his supervisor. The man respected boundaries. As Ethan's cart reached the executive floor, he found himself slowing down, eyes drawn inevitably to Victoria's office. The light was on as usual, but the office itself was empty. A glance at his watch confirmed it was after 11. Even Victoria Hayes occasionally went home at a reasonable hour. He was mopping the hallway outside her office when the elevator chimed. Ethan looked up, startled, as Victoria herself stepped out. She was dressed formally in a black evening dress and heels, clearly coming from some corporate function. She stopped short when she saw him, surprise giving way to a small smile. Mr. Parker, she said, her tone deliberately professional. Working late, I see. As always, Ms. Hayes, he replied, matching her formality. You're back late yourself. Charity auction. Unavoidable. She glanced around, confirming they were alone, before adding more softly, it's good to see you, Ethan. The simple sincerity in her voice warmed him. You too, Victoria. She moved toward her office, then paused at the door. Did you have a chance to think about what we discussed? I did, Ethan said carefully. I looked into the program. It seems like an amazing opportunity, but Victoria prompted, hearing the unspoken reservation in his tone. But I'm concerned about how it might look for both of us. Victoria considered this, her expression thoughtful. Would you have time for coffee tomorrow? Say noon? There's a cafe on the ground floor of the building next door. We could discuss your concerns. The suggestion of meeting during daylight hours in a semi-public space near their workplace carried its own implications. This wouldn't be a clandestine evening rendezvous, but a practical conversation conducted during business hours. I could do that, Ethan agreed. I picked Maya up from school at 3, so noon works well. Perfect. Victoria's professional mask softened momentarily. And Ethan, thank you for considering it, regardless of what you decide. The next day, Ethan arrived at the cafe precisely at noon, having spent his morning shift worrying over the upcoming conversation. Cafe was busy with the lunch crowd, primarily Meridian employees and workers from neighboring buildings. He spotted Victoria at a corner table, typing on her laptop, a half-eaten sandwich beside her. She looked up as he approached, closing her laptop with a smile. Right on time. Being punctual is pretty much a job requirement when you have a 7-year-old, Ethan said, taking the seat across. I ordered you a coffee, Victoria said, gesturing to the steaming mug on his side of the table. I hope that's okay. Perfect, thank you. He took a sip, grateful for the momentary distraction. Victoria didn't waste time on pleasantries. I've been thinking about your concerns and I want to address them directly. You're worried about appearances, about people assuming you're receiving special treatment because of ... whatever this is between us. She gestured vaguely between them. Essentially, yes, Ethan confirmed. Office gossip can be brutal. I don't want to become the subject of it, and I certainly don't want you to be. I appreciate that concern, Victoria said, but there's a straightforward solution. The education program is administered through HR, not directly through my office. If you apply through normal channels, go through the standard approval process. There's no reason for anyone to assume any impropriety, except that the CEO and the janitor just happen to develop a ... friendship. At the same time, the janitor suddenly gets approved for a benefit few maintenance staff ever utilize. Victoria's expression turned serious. Ethan, do you know how many Meridian employees currently use the education benefit? He shook his head. Less than 12%, she said. It's one of our most underutilized programs, despite being one of our most valuable. I've been pushing department heads to encourage more staff to take advantage of it. She leaned forward slightly. The truth is, I mentioned it to you because I genuinely believe you'd benefit from it, and because you expressed interest in returning to your studies. But you wouldn't be getting special treatment, you would be doing exactly what I wish more employees would do. Ethan considered this. And if I apply and don't get approved, then I don't intervene, Victoria said firmly. That's the only way this works. It has to be completely above board. You apply, your application is evaluated on its merits, and whatever the outcome, we accept it. No special treatment, no pulling strings. The proposal was fair, more than fair, yet Ethan still hesitated. And what about ... this? He mirrored her earlier gesture between them. Whatever's happening here? Victoria's expression softened. That's a separate question, isn't it? One worth exploring regardless of what you decide about the education program. The simple acknowledgement that something was indeed developing between them, something worth pursuing, sent a jolt of both anticipation and anxiety through Ethan. It would still be complicated, he pointed out. You're still the CEO. I'm still the night janitor. Yes, she agreed without hesitation. It would be complicated. I'm not suggesting otherwise. But Ethan, she reached across the table, briefly touching his hand before withdrawing. Most worthwhile things in life are complicated. Before he could respond, a voice called out from nearby. Victoria, I thought that was you. They both looked up to see Richard Jenkins, Meridian's chief financial officer, approaching their table with a surprised smile. Ethan recognized him immediately, a tall, silver-haired man in his 50s who rarely acknowledged the maintenance staff. Victoria's expression shifted seamlessly into professional mode. Richard, enjoying a lunch break for once? Client meeting ran shorter than expected, Jenkins replied, his gaze shifting curiously to Ethan. I don't believe we've met. Ethan Parker, Victoria supplied smoothly. From our maintenance department, MR. Parker was just discussing the employee education program with me. He's interested in architecture and urban design areas that could benefit our property development division down the line. The ease with which she crafted the explanation, truthful yet strategic, impressed Ethan. It wasn't a lie, yet it framed their meeting in purely professional terms. Jenkins's interest visibly waned once Ethan was identified as maintenance staff. I see. Well, don't let me interrupt. Victoria, don't forget we have the Thompson briefing at 2. It's already prepped, Victoria assured him. I'll see you there. As Jenkins walked away, Ethan released a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. That was ... single quotes, a perfect example of why discretion matters. Victoria finished for him. Richard is a gossip, but he's also predictable. He won't think twice about this conversation now that he believes it's about corporate talent development. Ethan studied her with new appreciation. You navigate these waters every day, don't you? Always calculating how things might be perceived, how to frame conversations. It becomes second nature, Victoria admitted. Sometimes exhaustingly so. She glanced at her watch. I should get back. The Thompson briefing actually isn't until 2:30, but I have calls before then. As they both stood to leave, Victoria added quietly, think about the program, Ethan. Apply or don't apply, that's entirely your choice. But please don't let concerns about us influence that decision. Your potential is too valuable to waste because of complications that we can manage. I'll think about it, Ethan promised. All of it. Victoria smiled, warm and genuine despite the public setting. That's all I ask. That evening, Ethan sat at his kitchen table, application forms for Meridian's education program spread before him. Maya was in bed, the apartment quiet except for the occasional hum of the refrigerator and distant traffic outside. The forms were straightforward enough: education history, career goals, proposed course of study, and how it would benefit both the employee and Meridian. Ethan tapped his pen against the table, mind circling the same questions that had kept him awake the previous night. Was this the right decision for Maya, for himself? And how much of his hesitation stemmed from practical concerns versus fear of the unknown? His phone chimed with a text message. Victoria, no pressure, just checking in. Hope today wasn't too awkward. Ethan smiled despite himself. He typed back, just filling out application forms. Jenkins didn't make it weird yet. Her response came quickly. Filling them out is a good sign, and don't worry about Richard. I've already redirected his attention to the quarterly projection, his favorite distraction. Ethan stared at the message, struck by the casual intimacy of it at Victoria Hayes, CEO of Meridian Financial, texting him about office politics while he sat in his modest apartment in worn sweatpants. The absurdity of it made him laugh softly. "What's so funny about quarterly projections?" came her follow-up text. "Just the surreal nature of all this," he replied honestly. "The janitor and the CEO." Texting about forums and office gossip, there was a longer pause before her next message. "The architect and the frustrated marine biologist. The rest is just packaging." Something loosened in Ethan's chest at her words. The rest is just packaging. Was it really that simple? Could they set aside their professional identities and just be two people connecting over shared understanding and mutual attraction? His phone chimed again. Too philosophical for text messages? Maybe, he typed back. Or maybe just what I needed to hear. Thank you. Anytime. Good night, Ethan. Good night, Victoria. He returned to the application with renewed purpose, filling out each section with careful consideration. Under career goals, he hesitated only briefly before writing. To complete my architectural degree and eventually contribute to urban renewal projects that create more functional, beautiful spaces for communities in need. It felt both terrifying and liberating to articulate the dream he'd carried silently for so long. By the time he signed the final page, a sense of calm determination had replaced his earlier uncertainty. Whatever came of his relationship with Victoria, complicated, impossible, or somewhere in between, this step was about reclaiming a part of himself that had been set aside but never truly abandoned. The next morning, he dropped the completed application at HR before his shift ended, nodding to the sleepy-eyed receptionist who barely glanced at the forms before adding them to her inbox. 2 weeks passed with no word about his application. Ethan and Victoria maintained a careful distance at work, though they exchanged occasional text messages, brief, casual communications about their days, Maya's school project, Victoria's frustrating board meeting. Each message strengthened the tenuous connection between them while respecting the necessary boundary of their work environment. Then, on a rainy Tuesday, Ethan received an email from Meridian's HR department requesting an interview regarding his application. The following day, he found himself sitting in a small conference room, dressed in the only suit he owned, slightly outdated but well-maintained, answering questions from the program coordinator and an HR representative. "Your application is quite impressive, Mr. Parker," the coordinator, a woman named Janice Wells, commented. "Your transcripts from your previous studies show exceptional promise, and your essay on community-centered architectural design was thoughtful and aligned with Meridian's community development initiative." "Thank you," Ethan replied, trying to project confidence despite his nerves. "I do have one concern," the HR representative interjected. "The position you're applying for JR draftsman in the property development division would require daytime hours. Would this affect your childcare arrangement?" It was a fair question, one Ethan had anticipated. "I've already discussed possible schedule changes with my sister, who helps with my daughter. Additionally, the school Maya attends offers after-school programs until 6. Between those resources and adjusting my own schedule, I'm confident we can make it work." The interview continued for 20 minutes, covering everything from his technical skills to his long-term career aspirations. Throughout, Ethan was struck by how seriously they were taking his application. There was no hint that they viewed him as just a janitor or an unusual candidate for the program. As the interview concluded, Janice smiled warmly. "Thank you for your time, Mr. Parker. We'll be in touch within the week regarding our decision." 3 days later, Ethan received the email. He had been accepted into the program, starting in 6 weeks. He would transition to a part-time position as a junior draftsman in the property development division while attending evening classes at the local university to complete his architectural degree. The position came with a modest salary increase, not dramatic, but enough to offset the reduced hours and provide a bit more financial stability. That night, after putting Maya to bed, Ethan texted Victoria, "I got in. No strings pulled, just like you promised." Her response was immediate. "Congratulations. Never doubted you for a moment. This calls for a celebration." Before he could respond, another message followed, completely professional, of course. "Coffee tomorrow? Same place, same time?" "I'll be there," he replied, unable to contain his smile. The next day's lunch meeting had a different energy, lighter, more relaxed, filled with genuine excitement on both sides. Victoria listened attentively as Ethan shared details about the position and his upcoming class schedule. "I knew you'd get it," she said when he finished. "Your talent was never in question, just your willingness to take the leap. I might not have taken it without your encouragement," Ethan admitted. "Thank you for that. Single quotes." Victoria shook her head slightly. "Don't thank me. This was all you, Ethan. I just pointed out a door that was already there. You're the one who walked through it." They discussed practical matters, his transition timeline, the department he'd be joining, the professors he might encounter at the university. Victoria offered insights about the property development team without overstepping into areas that might suggest improper influence. As their coffee meeting drew to a close, Victoria glanced at her watch. "I have a meeting in 15 minutes. But before I go," she hesitated, seeming uncharacteristically uncertain. "Would you and Maya like to join me for dinner this weekend?" "Nothing formal, just ... I'd like to meet her, if that's not too much." The invitation caught Ethan off guard. Meeting Maya represented a significant step, one that would move whatever was developing between them firmly beyond casual friendship into something more defined. "You want to meet my daughter?" he asked, wanting to be sure he understood her intention. Victoria nodded, her expression earnest. "I do. She's the most important person in your life. and I'd like to know her, but only if you're comfortable with that. I understand if it's too soon. Ethan considered carefully. Maya was perceptive and curious. She would inevitably have questions about Victoria, about why her father was suddenly having dinner with his boss. Yet there was something right about the idea about allowing these separate parts of his life to connect, at least tentatively. I'd like that, he said finally. Maya would too, I think. She's been curious about where I work, who I work for, and this might be a good opportunity to help her understand the changes coming up. Victoria's smile was warm, genuine, wonderful. Saturday evening? I know a great pizza place with an arcade section that kids love. Very casual, no pressure. Perfect, Ethan agreed. Maya's a pizza connoisseur. Self-proclaimed, of course. As they parted ways outside the cafe, Victoria surprised him by briefly squeezing his hand, a small gesture of affection. Cord there and gone in an instant, but enough to send a current of warmth through him that lingered long after she'd walked away. So she's your boss? Maya asked on Saturday afternoon as Ethan helped her pick out an outfit for dinner. The most important boss of everyone? Yes, she's the CEO, Ethan explained, holding up 2 different shirts for Maya's consideration. That means she runs the whole company. Maya pointed decisively to the purple shirt with tiny silver stars. This one. Is she nice? Is she mean like the boss in that movie we watched where the lady wears all the fancy clothes and makes everyone scared? Ethan laughed, recognizing the reference to a film they'd watched together. No, she's not mean like that. She's smart and determined, but also kind. He handed Maya the chosen shirt. And she's looking forward to meeting you. Why? Maya's directness, as always, cut straight to the heart of the matter. Do bosses usually have dinner with the people who clean their offices? It was a fair question, one that forced Ethan to consider how much to explain about his evolving relationship with Victoria. He opted for a simplified truth that a 7-year-old could understand. Not usually, no, but Victoria, Ms. Hayes, and I have become friends. And she knows I'm going to be changing jobs at the company, working as a draftsman while I go back to school for architecture. She wants to meet you because you're important to me, and friends want to know about important things in each other's lives. Maya absorbed this explanation with the serious consideration she applied to all new information. Is she helping you become an architect, like how Ramirez helped Zoe's mom get a better job at the hospital? Ethan smiled at his daughter's attempt to contextualize the situation. Sort of. She told me about a program at the company that helps employees go back to school, but I had to apply and get accepted on my own. That's good, Maya declared, pulling on her chosen shirt. Dad, do you like her? Like her. The question, delivered with the particular emphasis only a 2nd grader could master, made Ethan pause. It's ... complicated, pumpkin. We're still getting to know each other. Maya nodded sagely. That's what Zoe's mom said about her new boyfriend before she let Zoe meet him. And now they're getting married. Let's not get ahead of ourselves, Ethan cautioned, though he couldn't help smiling at his daughter's straightforward logic. Tonight is just pizza and maybe some arcade games. Nothing serious, if you say so. Maya replied with exaggerated skepticism that made Ethan wonder when exactly his little girl had become so perceptive. The pizza place Victoria had suggested was perfect, casual enough that both Ethan and Maya felt comfortable, yet nice enough to indicate thought had gone into the selection. It featured handcrafted pizzas, a modest but quality selection of beer and wine for adults, and a small but well-maintained arcade area visible from the dining section. Victoria was already seated when they arrived. Dressed in casual weekend attire, jeans, a simple blouse, and minimal jewelry. It was the most relaxed Ethan had ever seen her, and the sight sent a small jolt of awareness through him. This wasn't CEO Victoria Hayes, but simply Victoria, a woman meeting her friend's daughter for the first time. She stood as they approached, her smile warm but a hint of nervousness visible in her eyes. You must be Maya, she said, extending her hand formally. I'm Victoria. I've heard so much about you. Maya, suddenly shy, shook Victoria's hand with surprising solemnity. My dad says you're the boss of everyone at his work. Victoria laughed, the sound genuine and relaxed. Well, I suppose that's technically true, though it sounds rather intimidating when you put it that way. I prefer to think of myself as someone who helps everyone work together effectively, like a teacher. Maya asked, sliding into the booth. Very much like a teacher, yes, Victoria agreed, sitting back down. Though I don't get to hand out gold stars nearly as often as I'd like. My teacher, Ms. Wilson, gives us smiley face stickers when we do good work, Maya informed her. Do you give Dad stickers? Ethan felt his face warm. Maya, I haven't yet, Victoria replied seriously. But now that you mention it, I think that's an excellent management technique I should consider implementing. She winked at Ethan over Maya's head, her eyes sparkling with amusement. To Ethan's relief, the initial awkwardness quickly dissolved as they ordered their pizzas margarita for Victoria, pepperoni for Ethan, and cheese with extra cheese for Maya. Victoria had a natural way with Maya, asking questions about school and her interests without talking down to her or using the exaggerated enthusiasm some adults adopted with children. Dad says you wanted to study fish when you were younger, Maya said as they waited for their food. Victoria looked surprised, then pleased that Ethan had shared this detail with his daughter. Marine biology, yes. I was fascinated by ocean ecosystems, especially tides, all those different creatures living together in such a small space, each with its own special role to play. I like whales, Maya offered. We're doing a project about endangered animals at school. I picked the blue whale because it's the biggest animal ever. Even bigger than dinosaurs. That's absolutely right, Victoria confirmed. Blue whales are extraordinary creatures. Did you know they can communicate with each other over hundreds of miles of ocean? Maya's eyes widened. Really? How do they do that? As Victoria explained whale vocalizations and communication patterns, Ethan watched the easy interaction between them with a mixture of wonder and cautious hope. There was something both surreal and perfectly natural about seeing these two important parts of his life connecting. Victoria gesturing animatedly as she described whale song, Maya leaning forward with rapt attention, both of them momentarily forgetting he was there. Their pizza arrived, temporarily pausing the marine biology lesson. As they ate, the conversation flowed naturally between topics: Maya's school, Victoria's travels, Ethan's upcoming classes. There was no awkwardness, no strain of forced politeness, just three people enjoying each other's company. Dad, can I go play games now? Maya asked after demolishing her pizza with impressive speed. I finished all my crusts. You can, Ethan agreed, reaching for his wallet. Let me get you some tokens. I took the liberty of purchasing a game card when I arrived, Victoria said, producing a plastic card from her purse. It has 50 credits on it. I hope that's okay. Ethan hesitated, a reflexive protest forming. Maya, however, had no such reservation. Thank you, she exclaimed, accepting the card with gleeful excitement. Dad, can I go now, please? You can see the arcade area from here, Victoria assured him. She'll be perfectly safe. All right, Ethan conceded. Stay where we can see you and no talking to strangers. I know, Dad. Maya sighed with the long-suffering patience of a child who had heard the same instructions countless times. She slid out of the booth and dashed toward the arcade, pausing only briefly to look back and call, "Thank you for the game card, Ems, Victoria." As Maya disappeared into the arcade, Ethan turned to Victoria. "You didn't have to do that. I wanted to," she replied simply. "Besides, I thought you and I might appreciate a few minutes to talk without having to carefully monitor every word." She smiled, taking a sip of her wine. "She's wonderful, Ethan. Smart, curious, confident. You've done an amazing job with her. She makes it easy," Ethan said, watching as Maya methodically assessed the arcade options before settling on a racing game. "Most days, anyway. She seems to be the news of your career change. Well, kids are adaptable. For her, the most exciting part is that Dad will be home in the evenings to help with homework and do bedtime routine." He glanced at Victoria. "Thank you for suggesting this place. It's perfect. I did some research," Victoria admitted. "I wanted somewhere that would make both of you comfortable." She hesitated, then added more quietly, "This is important to me, Ethan. Getting to know Maya, seeing this part of your life, it matters." The simple honesty of her statement touched him deeply. Before he could respond, Maya came rushing back to the table, breathless with excitement. "Dad! Ems! Victoria, I won a jackpot on the ticket game. Look how many tickets I got." She proudly displayed a stream of paper tickets trailing from her small hand. "That's impressive," Victoria said with genuine enthusiasm. "What are you going to get with them?" "I don't know yet. I need to play more games first to get even more tickets. Then I can get something really good." She eyed the remaining pizza on their plates. "Are you guys done eating? Do you want to play games too?" Victoria looked at Ethan, an eyebrow raised in question. "What do you think, Dad? Are we ready for some serious arcade competition?" Something about the moment, Maya's infectious excitement, Victoria's playful challenge, the simple joy of being together, broke through the last of Ethan's reservations. This felt right in a way he couldn't articulate but couldn't deny either. "Absolutely," he said, sliding out of the booth. "But I should warn you both, I'm undefeated at skee-ball." Victoria's eyes sparkled with competitive amusement. "Is that so? Well, prepare to be dethroned, Mr. Parker. I spent every summer of my college years perfecting my skee-ball technique at the Boardwalk Arcade. For the next hour, the three of them moved through the arcade racing virtual cars, shooting digital basketballs, and indeed competing fiercely at skee-ball, where Victoria proved her boardwalk claims were not exaggerated. Ethan found himself repeatedly struck by the ease with which Victoria had slipped into their world, laughing with Maya, celebrating her victories, offering genuine guidance without overstepping. At the prize counter, Maya carefully counted her tickets and deliberated with the seriousness of a CEO making an acquisition decision before selecting a small plush whale choice that made Victoria smile knowingly. "Because of our whale talk," Maya explained, hugging the blue toy to her chest. "Now I can remember." Something flickered across Victoria's face. A brief, powerful emotion quickly contained, but not before Ethan caught it. This simple gesture from his daughter had touched Victoria deeply. As they walked to the parking lot afterward, Maya skipped ahead, engrossed in a one-sided conversation with her new whale toy. "Thank you for tonight," Victoria said quietly, walking beside Ethan. "For sharing her with me." "Thank you for wanting to meet her," Ethan replied. "She likes you." The whale is a pretty significant endorsement. She's usually very strategic with her arcade prizes. Victoria laughed softly. "I'm honored." She hesitated, then added, "This felt good, Ethan. Natural." "I wasn't sure if it would, but it did." "It did," he agreed, the simple acknowledgement carrying weight between them. When they reached Victoria's car, Maya surprised them both by stepping forward and giving Victoria an impulsive hug. "Thanks for the games and for telling me about whales. Can't we do this again sometime?" Victoria's composure momentarily faltered, her eyes meeting Ethan's over Maya's head with a silent question. At his slight nod, she returned Maya's hug with gentle warmth. "I would like that very much," she said, her voice carrying a hint of emotion she didn't try to hide. The weeks that followed brought significant changes to Ethan's life. His last last day on the night maintenance crew was marked by a surprisingly emotional farewell from Ray and the other janitors, complete with a card signed by everyone and a small cake in the break room. The next Monday, he reported to the property development division as a junior draftsman, exchanging his blue uniform for business casual attire and his mop for drafting tools and computer software. The transition wasn't without challenges, though his previous architectural training provided a solid foundation. Technology had evolved significantly in the years since he'd left school. The learning curve was steep, requiring late nights studying new software and brushing up on building code. Meanwhile, his evening classes demanded additional hours of study and project work. Through it all, Maya adapted with the resilience of childhood, proud to tell her friends that her dad was becoming an architect. She particularly enjoyed their new evening routine dinner together every night, homework at the kitchen table while Ethan worked on his own assignments, and proper bedtime stories without the exhaustion that had accompanied his night shift years. Victoria remained a constant presence in their lives, careful to maintain professional boundaries at work while gradually becoming more integrated into their personal world. She joined them for movie nights at Ethan's apartment, helped Maya with a science project on marine ecosystems, and occasionally met Ethan for lunch in the Meridian Tower Cafe. Brief, casual encounters that nonetheless fed the growing connection between them. In the office, their relationship remained discreet but not secret. Ethan's position in property development placed him several organizational layers removed from Victoria's direct authority, minimizing potential conflicts of interest. Still, they were careful. Victoria never showed him special attention in professional setting, and Ethan made a point of earning the respect of his new colleagues through dedication and skill rather than his personal connection to the CEO. 2 months into his new position, Ethan was assigned to a team working on preliminary concepts for a community center in a revitalization zone, the exact kind of project that had drawn him to architecture in the first place. The lead architect, impressed by Ethan's thoughtful suggestions about functionality and community integration, invited him to present his ideas at the next team meeting. The night before the presentation, Ethan sat at his kitchen table surrounded by sketches and notes, anxiety gnawing at his confidence. Maya had gone to bed hours earlier, leaving him alone with his doubts and the blinking cursor of his presentation software. His phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. "How's the presentation coming? Still planning to wow them tomorrow?" "Trying to," he typed back, more nervous than I expected. "It's been a long time since I had to present anything more complicated than Maya's school permission forms." "You'll be brilliant," came her immediate response. "Your ideas are solid, thoughtful, and exactly what that neighborhood needs. Just speak from that place of genuine care for the community." The simple vote of confidence steadied him. "Thanks. I needed that reminder. That's what I'm here for," among other things. The rare emoji from Victoria made him smile. "Now get some sleep. Genius requires rest." "Yes, boss," he replied with a grin before putting his phone aside and returning to his work with renewed focus. The presentation the next day went better than he'd dared hope. His teammates responded enthusiastically to his ideas for making the community center more accessible and integrated with the neighborhood's existing character. The lead architect asked pointed questions that pushed Ethan's thinking further, but his background research and genuine passion for the project carried him through. As the meeting dispersed, Ethan noticed Victoria standing just outside the glass wall of the conference room, ostensibly engaged in conversation with another executive but clearly positioned to observe the proceedings. Their eyes met briefly, her slight nod and subtle smile conveying pride and support without drawing attention. Later that afternoon, as Ethan worked at his desk, an email arrived from Victoria's assistant requesting his presence at a meeting in the executive suite at 4 o'clock. The formal tone and lack of explanation sent a ripple of unease through him. Had he somehow crossed a line? Was there a problem with his work? When he arrived at the appointed time, Victoria's assistant showed him not to her office but to a larger conference room where several people were already gathered. The lead architect from his team, the director of property development, and Richard Jenkins, the CFO, whose skeptical gaze tracked Ethan as he entered. Victoria sat at the head of the table, professional and composed. "Mr. Parker, thank you for joining us. Please have a seat." The formality of her address heightened Ethan's anxiety. He took the empty chair, nodding politely to the others while trying to read Victoria's expression for clues. "I've asked you here because your presentation this morning has sparked considerable interest," Victoria began. "Mira, Donovan tells me your design concepts for the community center project show exceptional promise, particularly your ideas about integrating sustainable features with community needs." The lead architect, Donovan, nodded in agreement. "Your approach bridges practical constraints with genuine community benefits. It's exactly the kind of thinking we need for this project." Relief washed over Ethan. Not in trouble. Then quite the opposite. "We've been discussing the possibility of expanding the scope of the community center project," Victoria continued. "Specifically, we're considering it as a pilot for a broader urban renewal initiative in partnership with the city. This would mean a more comprehensive development plan, incorporating housing, green spaces, and commercial elements alongside the community center." Jenkins cleared his throat. "It would also mean a significant significantly larger budget and higher profile for Meridian. The mayor's particularly interested in our involvement. Victoria nodded, acknowledged. Which brings us to why you're here. Mr. Parker, we'd like you to join the expanded project team in a more substantial capacity, focusing specifically on the community integration aspects that were so compelling in your presentation. Ethan blinked, processing what she was saying. I'm honored, but I'm still a junior draftsman. I've only been with the department for 2 months. Talent doesn't always correlate with seniority, Donovan said simply. Your background may be unconventional, but your insights are valuable. We need your perspective on this project. Ethan glanced at Victoria, who maintained her professional demeanor despite the warmth in her eyes. This wasn't favoritism, he could see that clearly in Donovan. Genuine enthusiasm, and even in Jenkins's reluctant nod of approval. This was recognition of his work on its own merits. I'd be delighted to accept, Ethan said finally. Thank you for the opportunity. The meeting continued, outlining project timelines and responsibilities. Throughout, Victoria treated Ethan with the same professional courtesy she extended to the other team members. No special attention, no familiar warmth, just the appropriate respect of a CEO for a promising employee. It was only later, as the meeting dispersed and Ethan gathered his notes, that Victoria lingered behind, allowing the others to exit first. Congratulations, she said quietly when they were alone. This is entirely earned, Ethan. Your work impressed everyone, especially Donovan, who rarely gets excited about junior staff contributions. Thank you, Ethan replied, equally soft, for the opportunity and for treating me like any other team member in there. You are any other team member in professional settings, Victoria said firmly. That's important to me, that your success here is your own, not a reflection of ... She glanced toward the door to ensure they were still alone. Speaking of which, I had a different reason for wanting to talk to you today. Oh, Maya's birthday's next weekend, Victoria said. I was wondering if you'd be comfortable with me attending her party, only if it wouldn't be awkward for you or confusing for her friends and their parents. I understand completely if it's too soon, the request touched Ethan deeply, both in its content and in the careful way Victoria framed it, prioritizing Maya's comfort and his boundaries above her own wishes. Actually, he said with a small smile, Maya specifically asked if you could come. She's been working on your invitation all week. It was supposed to be a surprise. Victoria's face lit up. Really? Really? She's quite taken with you, especially since you helped with her whale project. The party's at our apartment, nothing fancy, just cake and games with a few of her school friends. But she'd love for you to be there. I'd be honored, Victoria said, her professional mask slipping to reveal genuine emotion. Thank you, Ethan, as they walked out of the conference room together, maintaining a professional distance despite the personal nature of their conversation. Ethan reflected on how far they'd come from that first night when he'd driven a slightly intoxicated Victoria home from the gala. What had begun as an unexpected encounter between two people from vastly different worlds had evolved into something neither of them could have anticipated, a relationship built on mutual respect, shared vulnerability, and genuine care. The following Saturday, Victoria arrived at Ethan's apartment precisely on time, bearing a gift wrapped in paper decorated with whales and ocean creatures. The small gathering was already underway, with 6 of Maya's friends engaged in an elaborate game in the living room while 2 other parents chatted, with Ethan's sister Kate in the kitchen. Maya spotted Victoria immediately, abandoning her game to rush over with excited greeting. You came? Did you see my special invitation? I made it myself. I did, Victoria confirmed, crouching to Maya's level despite her elegant outfit. It was beautiful, especially the glitter whales. I've never seen such artistic sotation. Maya giggled at the fancy word before proudly introducing Victoria to her friends. This is Ems, Victoria. She's the boss of my dad's whole company, and she knows everything. And she's really good at skee-ball. The simple, matter-of-fact introduction, free from the complications of adult relationship labels or social expectation, made both Ethan and Victoria smile. To Maya, Victoria's presence in their lives was straightforward. She was someone who made her dad happy, who shared interesting knowledge, and who played games with genuine enthusiasm. What more qualification did an adult need in a child's world? As the party progressed, Victoria moved between worlds with surprising ease, discussing school fundraisers with the other parents, helping Ethan serve cake, and joining in the children's games with uninhibited joy that revealed a playful side he rarely glimpsed in other settings. Later, as the party wound down and the last guests departed, Maya sat amid a pile of opened gifts, carefully examining each one with appropriate appreciation. When she reached Victoria's package, she unwrapped it with particular care, gasping when she revealed a beautiful illustrated book about marine ecosystems and a small telescope. For stargazing and whale watching, Victoria explained, though I should warn you that whale watching usually requires being near an ocean. We could go sometime, Maya said instantly, looking between Victoria and her father with hopeful eyes. All of us together, like a family trip. The innocent suggestion hung in the air, laden with meaning that Maya couldn't fully grasp, but that resonated powerfully with both adults. It was Kate who smoothly intervened, suggesting that Maya show her the telescope's features while Ethan and Victoria cleaned up the remaining party debris. Alone in the kitchen, Ethan and Victoria exchanged a look that contained volumes acknowledgement of the boundary Maya had innocently pushed, recognition of the path they were tentatively walking, and the unspoken question of of where it might lead. She has a way of cutting to the heart of things, doesn't Victoria said softly, gathering paper plates from the table. It's her superpower, Ethan agreed, seeing through all the adult complications to what matters. He hesitated, then added, for what it's worth, I think a whale-watching trip sounds wonderful. Someday. Victoria's smile was gentle, her eyes holding his. Someday, she agreed, the word a promise rather than a deflection. 6 months flew by in a whirlwind of change and progress. Ethan thrived in his new position, his contributions to the community center project earning recognition throughout Meridian's property development division. His evening classes challenged him, but the material came back more easily than he dared hope. His professors impressed by his practical insights and real-world perspective. Maya blossomed too, her second-grade year concluding with academic honors and a newfound passion for both marine biology and astronomy interests that Victoria enthusiastically encouraged with books, museum trips, and the promised whale-watching expeditions scheduled for the upcoming summer. Victoria herself had undergone subtle but significant changes. The ruthless efficiency that had defined her early tenure as CEO remained, but it was now tempered by a more balanced approach to leadership. She left the office at reasonable hours more frequently, instituted family-friendly policies that benefited employees at all levels, and developed a reputation for asking thoughtful questions about the community impact of Meridian's projects. Their relationship had evolved with careful deliberation, each step forward taken with full awareness of the complications their positions created. They maintained professional boundaries at work while gradually allowing their personal connection to deepen outside of Meridian Tower. Victoria became a regular presence at Ethan's apartment for dinner and movie nights, joined him and Maya for weekend outings, and occasionally hosted them at her penthouse for what Maya called fancy breakfast on Sunday morning. It was at one such breakfast, nearly 8 months after that first fateful drive home, that Victoria surprised them both. I've been meaning to tell you, she said, refilling Ethan's coffee cup with the expensive brew he'd grown to appreciate. I've been invited to speak at next month's Architectural Innovation Conference. They want a business perspective on community-centered development. That's fantastic, Ethan replied, genuinely pleased for her. You'll be brilliant. The thing is, Victoria continued, a hint of nervousness in her voice. The conference is in San Diego, near the ocean, during Maya's spring break. Ethan caught her meaning immediately. Victoria, are you suggesting ... a whale-watching trip? Maya exclaimed, connecting the dots with characteristic directness. Like we talked about. Victoria smiled, her eyes on Ethan. Exactly. I thought perhaps you both might join me. I'd handle the conference portion, of course, but we could extend the trip for a few days. Ocean, whales, tide pools, ... single quotes, she trailed off, the invitation hanging between them. It was more than a vacation proposal. It was an acknowledgement of what they had become to each other, not just CEO and employee, not just friends who occasionally shared meals, but something more integrated, more meaningful, a unit. Perhaps even, as Maya had innocently suggested months earlier, a family of sorts. We'd love to, Ethan said simply, the decision requiring no deliberation. The weeks leading up to the trip were filled with preparation, Ethan arranging time off from both work and classes, Maya researching whale species they might encounter, Victoria securing adjoining hotel rooms with an ocean view, coordinating with a highly rated whale-watching tour company. The night before their departure found them at Meridian Tower, working late to tie up loose ends before their absence. Maya was spending the night at Kate's, allowing Ethan to finalize some project documentation while Victoria concluded a series of meetings. As he saved his final files and prepared to leave, a light knock sounded on the door of the small office he shared with 2 other junior team members. Victoria stood in the doorway, elegant in a charcoal suit, but visibly tired after her marathon of meetings. Still here? She asked, though the answer was obvious. Just finishing up, Ethan replied, shutting down his computer. You look exhausted. 14 board member calls in 6 hours will do that, she admitted with a rueful smile. The price of taking actual vacation days. Heaven forbid the CEO be unreachable for a full week. Second thoughts? Ethan asked, gathering his belongings. Not one, Victoria said firmly. This trip is non-negotiable. Maya has been counting down the days, and frankly, so have I. They walked together to the elevator, maintaining the professional distance they always observed within Meridian's walls. As they descended to the parking garage, Victoria leaned against the elevator wall with a sigh. I may have overdone it today, she admitted. I haven't eaten since breakfast, and those conference calls were more contentious than expected. Let me drive you home, Ethan offered immediately. You can leave your car here and take a cab back tomorrow before our flight. Victoria's smile held a hint of nostalgia. Taking me home again, Mr. Parker? This feels familiar. Different circumstances, Ethan pointed out as they exited the elevator. For one thing, you're sober this time, and you're no longer the janitor, Victoria added softly. So much has changed since that night. The drive to Victoria's apartment was quiet, both of them tired but content in each other's company. As Ethan pulled up to the familiar entrance, Victoria turned to him with an unexpectedly serious expression. Do you remember what you said to me that first night, when you drove me home from the gala? Ethan frowned slightly, trying to recall. Not specifically. I think we talked about Maya, about my old architecture studies. Why? Victoria's eyes held his, warm and intent. You said something that stayed with me. even through the haze of those martinis. He said, "We all have our battles." Such a simple statement, but something about the way you said it without judgment, without pretense, it cut through all my carefully constructed walls. "I didn't realize," Ethan said softly. "That night after you left, I stood in my empty penthouse and realized I couldn't remember the last time someone had spoken to me as just a person, not as the CEO, not as someone to impress or manipulate or fear, just ... a human being fighting her own battles." She reached across the console to take his hand. "I remember everything you said that night, Ethan, every word." It was the first honest conversation I'd had in years. The confession hung between them, weighted with the significance of all that had followed from that seemingly minor interaction, the broken pipe. The coffee meetings, the education program, Maya's birthday party, and now this trip that represented another step forward in their evolving relationship. "I'm glad I was there that night," Ethan said simply, "for both our sakes." Victoria squeezed his hand gently. "Would you like to come up? We could order dinner, go over the trip details one more time." "I'd like that," Ethan replied. As they walked through the lobby together, the doorman nodded to them with the familiar acknowledgement of a regular visitor. In the elevator, Victoria leaned against Ethan's shoulder, the professional distance they maintained at work dissolving in the privacy of this transition space. "I never expected this," she murmured. "Any of it. You, Maya, this ... happiness." "Neither did I," Ethan admitted. "After Diane died, I thought that part of my life was over. All my energy went to Maya, to keeping our world stable. I never imagined there'd be room for anything else." Victoria looked up at him, her expression open and vulnerable in a way few people ever witnessed. "And now? Now I can't imagine our world without you in it," he said honestly. "Neither can Maya." The elevator doors opened to Victoria's penthouse floor. As they stepped out together, she turned to face him fully. "I love you, Ethan Parker," she said, the words simple but profound. "You and Maya both. I don't need a response right now. I know this is complicated, that there are considerations beyond just how we feel. But I wanted you to know before we take this trip, before we step further into whatever this is becoming." Ethan felt the truth of his response before the words formed. "I love you too, Victoria. We both do. The complications, the challenges, they're worth navigating for what we've found together." Her smile bloomed, transforming her face with a joy that erased the exhaustion of her demanding day. "Then let's navigate them together." As they entered her apartment, hands still linked, Ethan reflected on the improbable journey that had brought them to this moment. From janitor and CEO to partners in every sense that mattered. From a chance encounter on a rainy night to a future neither could have imagined. Sometimes the most unexpected detours led to the most beautiful destinations. And sometimes, the simple act of seeing another person, truly seeing them beyond titles and circumstances, could change everything. "I remember everything you said," Victoria had whispered that night. And from those remembered words, a new story had begun, one they were now writing together one day at a time.